Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. Welcome back, everyone, to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am Michael Cloggs, your host. So, first up, we want to talk to you about today is in Surrey, BC, the mayor, Doug McCallum, has found himself in a bit of legal hot water. This refers to an incident that may or may not have happened on September 4th, 2021, where he ran into a bunch of protesters protesting the idea of allowing Surrey, BC to take place, and thus eliminating from Surrey the RCMP, as it would be replaced by the Surrey police force. There's been a lot of controversy around that, a lot of how's this going to get paid for, and where's it going to fall in the budget. A lot of locked doors, a lot of blankets covering up things that citizens of Surrey have answered. So, a group, as you drive across Surrey, BC, or drive around the neighborhoods, you will see "Keep the RCMP in Surrey." And the group that is behind those signs, they were at a grocery store gathering signatures when Mayor McCallum, on his off days, was going inside the grocery store to shop. Reportedly, there was a confrontation, and at the end of that confrontation on September 4th, Mayor McCallum claims that he had his foot run over by someone driving a vehicle that was attached to this group opposing Surrey police force. Henceforth, he did take this to court, and through investigation, they discovered that there was something unfounded about the accusation. He has been, as of as of December 2021, he has now been charged with a criminal charge of causing mischief, or should we say public mischief, in one count. So he's charged with this public mischief, and he is now using municipal funds to pay for his legal team to fight the battle against his public mischief. It is now causing even more uprise, where people are, why should we be paying for your legal fees because you did something wrong? There's a whole more controversy around, should he be allowed to continue forth with the Surrey police force? Should there be a vote put forth to the residents and citizens of Surrey, BC, so that they can actually get their say and opinion in on whether they want this police force or not? And There is been several articles written about this in the local papers, highlighting some stuff from the Cloverdale Reporter. The Peace Arch News have written a few articles about it, and it has also made it into the Vancouver Province and the Vancouver Sun as to what sort of trouble and mischief Mayor McCallum is up to. You can even find it on Twitter. The question still remains, though, even as mayor, should he be allowed to fight a legal battle of criminal charges levied against him while he was not acting as mayor, he was acting as a private citizen? Or is he always mayor, or can he be a private citizen? But the question still remains, should he be allowed to fight a criminal charge levied against him with municipal funds? So I invite everybody listening to go check this out. Go to the Cloverdale Reporter at cloverdalereporter.com, or go to the Peace Arch News at peacearch.com and check it out on. You just simply Google Vancouver Sun or Vancouver Province, and you'll find information on this. Please go check it out and decide for yourself. And if you live in Surrey, BC, please voice your opinion to the City Council and find out why he's being allowed to use municipal funds to fund his legal defense against this public mischief charge. Okay, so moving on to other things, and this past week we had Chrystia Freeland, and she was speaking on the Parliament floor about Bill C2 and how this bill should help tourism, hospitality industry, as well as the cultural sector and artists maintain their incomes, because as we know, these people were very hard hit by the pandemic. COVID-19 has caused a lot of shutdowns. With tourism being down, there are groups of artists that actually depend on tourism in order to put supper on the table. You know, they'll saying that somebody sings for their supper. Well, it's very true, especially if you're dependent on being able to do live performances and art expositions that are put in front of tourists. Tourism dollars are down, and this is their livelihood also. She also spoke about other things to help other Canadian workers that were put on lockdown, and the lockdown, the benefits of $300 per week that will go to those affected by COVID-19 and related local lockdowns. So she was also speaking about, of course, the budget and other things that the Liberals are trying to do to keep the Canadian economy thriving. So while we're still talking about COVID-19, we have the latest Omicron variant, and in British Columbia there have been a new series of rules and orders placed by Dr. Bonnie Henry about the holidays. and how we should be trying to put together our family events, and how we should be able to limit unvaccinated family from meeting up with vaccinated family, and restricting those who are unvaccinated from being able to gather as families during this holiday time. So why don't we listen to what was actually said by Christia Freeland and Dr. Bonnie Henry, and we'll also hear from the WHO about the Omicron variant and its spread. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, colleagues in this House, and Canadians, many apologies for the technical challenges. I have the honor to table in both official languages the Economic and Fiscal Update 2021. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, I wish to table a notice of a Ways and Means motion to implement certain provisions of the Economic and Fiscal Update tabled in Parliament on December 14th, 2021, and other measures. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I ask that an order of the day be designated for consideration of the motion. I
also have the honor to table a notice of Ways and Means in view of tabling a law to implement a tax on digital services. I also ask that this motion be tabled, added to the order of business of today. Thank you for your patience, and to all colleagues in the House for their patience.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, please do. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
21 months ago, a global pandemic reached our shores. Few of us had any idea how long it would last or the toll it would take. And today, we are facing Omicron, an even more virulent variant of this virus. But we can be confident that we will get through this, because our government did understand from the very outset that to save lives, our economy would have to be locked down. So we put in place unprecedented measures to meet this unprecedented challenge. We supported municipalities and we supported provinces and territories. We supported our healthcare system and we supported schools. We provided free vaccines and PPE and rapid tests and therapeutic medicines. Notre priorité.
Our focus was on people and jobs. We helped millions of Canadians through income supports. We delivered direct payments to seniors and families. We also helped companies, small businesses in particular, to keep their doors open. And we helped workers keep their jobs through wage subsidies, rent subsidies, and small business loans.
Nous avons agi ainsi.
We did this because it was the right thing to do. We also did it because we knew it was an investment in our economy that would pay off. Our goal was to prevent economic scarring. We wanted to emerge from this with our economic muscle intact, ready as a country to come roaring back. Keeping the Canadian economy on life support was costly, as we went into hibernation, but we knew that keeping Canadian families and businesses solvent would help our economy rebound.
This economic and fiscal update provides Canadians with a transparent report of our nation's finances. It also includes targeted investments that will ensure we have the weapons we need to finish the fight against COVID-19, an effort more urgent now than ever with the surge of Omicron. First, we're protecting children with pediatric vaccines, now available for free for all children 5 and over. Booster shots are free for all Canadians too, just as first and second doses have been. Omicron makes boosters more urgently important now than ever. Please go and get your booster as soon as you are eligible. I have booked mine, and I'm very glad to have done so. We have enough boosters for everyone, and boosters are an essential defense against the mounting threat of Omicron. We're investing in new antiviral drugs for COVID-19 patients that prevent hospitalizations and will save lives. We're investing in ventilation improvements to prevent outbreaks at schools and workplaces. Jusqu'à présent, notre gouvernement.
To date, our government has delivered nearly 80 million rapid tests to provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities, and this free of charge. This fiscal update sets aside a further $1.7 billion, enough to procure 180 million additional rapid tests. These rapid tests are an additional tool in the intensifying fight against Omicron. We are buying these tests and distributing them. We encourage Canadians to use them as well. We are also providing support to provinces and territories for proof of vaccination credentials. And as we brace ourselves for the rising wave of Omicron, we know that no one wants to endure new lockdowns. This is why vaccines, vaccine mandates, boosters, ventilation, and rapid tests are so essential. Over the past 21 months, we have all learned that fast, local action to limit outbreaks is much less costly than waiting and being forced to impose wider and deeper restrictions.
Grâce à ces connaissances.
In that knowledge, and out of an abundance of caution, we are providing local lockdown support for workers and businesses. These measures are an insurance policy for our country. They are in place to help local public health officials make the right decisions in the coming months. Difficult decisions will have to be made, but health officials will know that their communities will be able to obtain the support they need. We are also moving forward on 10 days of paid sick leave for workers in federally regulated businesses.
And we are provisioning an additional $4.5 billion to pay for possible further costs of fighting Omicron and other COVID-19 surges, including spending on border measures and income and business supports. The COVID pandemic triggered the steepest economic contraction in Canada since the Great Depression. At its worst, it cost 3 million Canadians their jobs as our GDP shrank by 17%. This was a once-in-a-generation trauma. When it first hit, many predicted it would take years to rebuild. That's why we are so pleased to report that Canada has largely recovered from the economic damage inflicted by COVID-19 and is poised for robust growth in the months to come. We have now surpassed our target of creating 1 million jobs. In fact, we have recovered 106% of the jobs lost at the peak of the pandemic, significantly outpacing the United States, where just 83% of lost jobs have been recovered so far. From the start, we've understood that few things are more central to the economic well-being of Canadians than having a job. That's why our investments have been so singularly focused on employment and why Canada has experienced the second fastest jobs recovery in the G7. Our GDP has already returned to near pre-pandemic levels. Our GDP growth of 5.4% in the third quarter outpaced the US, the UK, Japan, and Australia. OECD projections suggest that by 2023, Canada's recovery will be the second fastest in the G7. This update shows that the size of the Canadian economy this year will be $2.48 trillion. When we published our economic forecast in the 2018 budget, that is almost exactly the size we expected our economy would have grown to by this year. And we made that forecast when none of us had any idea that our economic growth and our lives would be so deeply disrupted by COVID-19. We are back on track, Mr. Speaker, and that is good news for all Canadians. Canada posted a $25.1 billion surplus in our trade in goods in October, as our exports rose. Fewer businesses went bankrupt over the past year than in 2019, before the pandemic. There are now an additional 6,000 active businesses in Canada, compared to before the pandemic. Household employment income is now 7% above its pre-crisis level. And Canadians have used this difficult time to pay down their personal debt relative to their income. Our recovery from the COVID-19 recession has significantly surpassed Canada's recovery from the 2008 recession. We have already more than recovered lost jobs, a healing which took 8 months longer after the much milder 2008 recession. We're on track to recover lost GDP 5 months more quickly than after the 2008 contraction. Les bilans des gouvernements.
Provincial government balance sheets were sheltered from the pandemic, thanks to strong support from the federal government. Provincial and territorial government revenues actually increased in 2020-2021. Why? Thanks to substantial federal support, both through direct transfers and through Canada's COVID-19 economic response. This assistance helped to set a floor under provincial and territorial government revenues, thus limiting their deficits and debt. 8 out of every $10 provided to fight COVID-19 and support Canadians throughout the pandemic came from the federal government. Our government will continue to be agile despite the great volatility and new developments in health sectors and in the global economy. We must continue to manage the spread of this sneaky and unpredictable virus. The pain of families who lost a loved one can never be measured. Our guiding principle will continue to be the conviction that the best economic policy is a strong health policy. Because saving lives have always been our priority, we were able to achieve excellent economic performances and the second lowest mortality rate in the G7. As we look ahead, we are mindful of elevated inflation and its impact on the cost of living for Canadians. We know that inflation is a global phenomenon, driven by the unprecedented challenge of reopening the world's economy. Turning the world economy back on is a great deal more complicated than turning it off. During lockdowns, Canadians' incomes remain strong on average, but opportunities to spend on services were severely restricted. The result was that Canadians spent more on durable goods. Without meals in restaurants, personal care, or vacations, Canadians spent their disposable income on renovations, new furniture, appliances, and cars. It will take some time for supply chains to catch up and for our economy to rebalance itself. To alleviate pressure on Canada's supply chains, today we are announcing $50 million to launch a call for proposals. This will help Canadian ports acquire cargo storage capacity and take other measures to relieve supply chain congestion.
Our government understands that a strong monetary policy framework is the best weapon in our arsenal to keep prices stable so that Canadians can afford the cost of living. That's why yesterday we renewed the Bank of Canada's 2% inflation target to ensure that the current rate of inflation does not become entrenched. Canada was a pioneer when we established an inflation target to guide our central bank in setting interest rates. In the 30 years since, the Bank of Canada has successfully maintained price stability in our country. Our government has every confidence the bank will continue to deliver on this essential mandate. Canadians should be wholly confident in their central bank. Beaucoup de Canadiens s'inquiètent de
Many Canadians worry about making ends meet. That is why we're glad to have indexed the Canada Child Benefit to inflation, as well as indexing to inflation the Old Age Security, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the Goods and Services Tax Credit, and other benefits for the most vulnerable. Today, we are committing to provide to beneficiaries of the Guaranteed Income Supplement or allowance a one-time payment. This will help alleviate the financial hardship that they may have faced as a result of unintended consequences of receiving a second benefit. We are also laying out a plan to provide debt relief to students who need to repay the Canada Emergency Response benefits that they were not eligible for. We propose to offset their debt with the Canada Emergency Student Benefit amount for which they were eligible. We are also proposing to establish the $60 million Canada Performing Arts Workers Resilience Fund. This fund will support new or enhanced initiatives that improve the financial and career and working conditions of performance art workers, including independent contractors.
Second mortgage for many young Canadian families. And childcare, which is too expensive or just not available, keeps many mothers from going back to work. An unacceptable break on our economy at a time when we are facing labor force shortages. We knew that high-quality $10 a day childcare would make life more affordable for Canadian families and drive economic growth. That's why our $30 billion investment in early learning and childcare was the cornerstone of the April budget. Our plan was widely supported, but many Canadians were skeptical about our ability to get the job done. I understood them. After all, Canadian women had been trying to establish a national system of early learning and childcare for more than half a century. And, à l'exception du Québec, we had not succeeded. Well, today I have great news for Canada's working mothers and fathers. Less than 8 months after we announced our bold project in our budget, we now have childcare deals with 9 provinces and 1 territory. Within 5 years, Canadians will proudly rely on $10 a day childcare, just as our universal, publicly accessible healthcare system has come to define us as a society. This is a historic accomplishment which will transform the life of every parent in Canada and of every future parent in Canada for generations to come. So, let's give this effort a final push and conclude agreements with Ontario, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. We can and we must get this done now. Immigration is another important driver of economic growth and a Canadian competitive advantage. Our government is committed to bringing in 411,000 immigrants in 2022, the highest number in Canadian history. To help support this effort and reduce processing time for permanent and temporary resident and Canadian citizenship applications, we are investing $85 million in our immigration system. Housing prices are a real concern, especially for middle-class Canadians hoping to buy their first home. Housing affordability remains a priority for our government, and we will take further action in the upcoming budget. As we announced in the spring budget, on January 1st, 2022, our government will apply Canada's first national tax on vacant property owned by non-resident, non-Canadians. As we said we would, the government is also bringing forward legislation to extend the Northern Residence Deduction so Canadians in the North can claim up to $1,200 in eligible travel expenses on their taxes starting next month. The government will also bring forward legislation to extend small businesses' deadline for the repayment of Canada Emergency Business Account loans and ensure that seasonal workers who received pandemic benefits can still qualify for the EI Seasonal Workers Pilot Project. Les changements climatiques sont également.
Climate change is also contributing to causing increased volatility in the economy. The recent floods in British Columbia, which were tragic, devastated homes, farms, and critical infrastructure. It also further disrupted supply chains. Severe droughts, including across the prairies, contributed to driving up food prices. We are taking action to fight climate change. Canada is a world leader with its price on pollution. Our price on pollution is contributing to lowering emissions and building a cleaner economy. In fact, many countries are now seeking to be more ambitious and are taking inspiration from our plan. We are also working to finalize Canada's first national adaptation strategy by the end of next year. The green transition of the global economy is underway. This transition gives us new economic opportunities. as well as some major challenges. Our government is determined to ensure that Canadians emerge from this international transformation even more prosperous than we are today. This will ensure that there are good, sustainable jobs for Canadians in every corner of the country for decades to come.
We know that our national focus, once we emerge from COVID-19, must be growth and competitiveness. Measures to promote them will figure prominently in the budget. Our government understood from the start of this pandemic that the best way to maintain strong public finances was by keeping our economy strong. That's what our emergency spending achieved. This fall, Moody's and S&P both reaffirmed Canada's AAA credit rating. We know that Canadians work hard to earn a living and expect us to be careful with their money. We know we have a duty to do the right thing for today and for tomorrow. We understand that our debts must be repaid. We came into this crisis with the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and in fact, we have increased our relative advantage during the pandemic. We remain committed to the fiscal anchors that we outlined in the spring budget to reduce the federal debt to GDP ratio over the medium term and to unwind COVID-19 related deficits. In October, we pivoted from necessary but costly broad-based support programs to more narrowly targeted, less expensive measures, as we had promised we would do. Our government will continue to be a responsible and prudent fiscal manager. This update reports a deficit of $327.7 billion for the last fiscal year and of $144.5 billion for this fiscal year. This compares favorably to our forecast of $354.2 billion and $154.7 billion, respectively, in the April budget. Our debt to GDP ratio in the last fiscal year was 47.5%. It will peak at 48% in this fiscal year and then fall steadily, as will the deficit. This contrasts positively with our prediction in the April budget. In Budget 2021, we forecast that in this fiscal year, 42% of our bond issuance would be long-term debt of 10 years or more. Today, we can forecast that it will be 45%. And recall, in 2019, only 15% of our debt was locked in over a long-term horizon. Pushing more of our debt into bonds with a longer maturity ensures that Canada's debt servicing costs are sustainable. Thanks to an improving fiscal outlook, the amount of money we will need to issue in borrowings this year is $35 billion lower than forecast in Budget 2021. Despite a necessary and unprecedented level of spending to support Canadians during COVID-19, our public debt charges as a share of GDP will be the same this year and next year as they were in 2018-2019, before the pandemic. This fiscal update includes a provision to settle the cases on harm to First Nation children currently before the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and to invest in transforming the services offered to First Nation children and their families. We have provisioned $20 billion for compensation and $20 billion to improve the system going forward. The Government of Canada is working towards an agreement with the parties on this issue. We know that paying our historic debt to Indigenous peoples is paramount, and that we must act to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. We will not and we cannot evade this essential commitment. That is why we are today setting aside the funds to pay for it. It has been a hard 21 months, but we are succeeding because we are doing what Canadians do in a crisis. We are helping each other, we are working together, and we are doing what needs to be done, whether it is as big as the wage subsidies or as small as wearing a mask at the grocery store. With winter upon us and Omicron now among us, we know that there will still be tempests ahead. But we are resilient. Our plan is working. And once we finish the fight against COVID-19, we will turn our resolve towards fighting climate change, advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and building an economy that is stronger, fairer, more competitive, and more prosperous for all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Dix, and I'm the BC's Minister of Health, and to my right is Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's Provincial Health Officer. This is our COVID-19 update for today, Friday, December 17th. We're honored to be here on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. Dr. Henry is going to speak and describe the change to provincial health orders that are coming as of Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And then I'll say a few words, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bonnie Henry.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. As we have all seen in recent weeks, the newest variant, the Omicron variant of concern, is adding new and more complex challenges to our pandemic, and we are no exception here in British Columbia. Omicron is rapidly replacing the other variants here in BC, primarily Delta. There's several different strains of Delta that have been causing infections around our province, and as we have noted, has rapidly started causing rapid increase in the number of new cases of COVID-19 that we're seeing, particularly in Vancouver Coastal and the Fraser Health Region and here on Vancouver Island. It is moving quickly, and so must we. This is, of course, not where we want to be. We were making good progress. We had turned the corner of the wave that we've been dealing with for the last few months here in BC, but it is the reality of where we are. And right now, we need to slow the spread and ensure that our healthcare system and our communities are protected. We will see more cases. We know now globally that this Omicron strain is replacing Delta around the world. It is more transmissible, which means that it can spread with even a smaller amount of virus. It is spreading more rapidly than before, and we need to flatten that curve. If we see rapid increases in cases, we know that a certain proportion of those people will need hospital care. Right now, most of the cases that we're seeing are in younger people that are more connected, so it's spreading very rapidly, but they're not having severe illness. It's mostly mild illness, and that is for a couple of reasons. One, because people are younger right now, and also because we have very high vaccination rates, and that is reflected in the people who are getting infected right now, where we have not had hospitalizations, and people in the community who've had Omicron that we're aware of yet. But we know that we see the trajectory in countries around the world, and we're not going to be an exception to that. We will see rapidly rising cases over the next few weeks, and we need to take additional measures to slow that down so that we don't overwhelm our hospital system. One of the things that we also know is that if you are not yet vaccinated, if you do not have that protection that vaccination gives, this virus is spreading and more people are infected, you are at risk. Now is the time to get vaccinated. This virus will find you. We need to get vaccinated as soon as possible. Without a vaccine, you are at higher risk of serious illness and hospitalization. We know now with this strain that even if you are fully vaccinated, you can get infected, but it is a milder illness for most of those people. So we need to put in new measures in place for everyone. These are revisions to the orders that are in place now and will be in place starting on midnight on Sunday, so we'll start on Monday morning and extend through to January 31st, 2022. These amendments are about ensuring everyone is staying small, staying with the people they know, and with people who are vaccinated. Firstly, the events and gatherings order will be amended so to include all indoor personal gatherings, including at rentals, vacation properties, resorts, are limited to your household or the residents, plus no more than 10 additional individuals, or one other household. And this is if everybody is vaccinated. If you are unvaccinated or have members of your family who are unvaccinated, we cannot have personal gatherings in those settings right now. For events, on our BC vaccine card, proof of vaccine with the BC vaccine card is required no matter the size of events. It no longer starts with events including 50 or more people, which has been the case for the last few months. In addition, we need to step up our scanning of the QR code. We know that that is the best way to ensure that these are valid QR codes, and they must be checked at all events. Venues with a capacity of 1,000 or more people will be limited to 50% capacity, whether that's a concert, a hockey game, theater. If the capacity is more than 1,000, then we are reducing that by 50% capacity. And that's to ensure that we have additional space for people. These are events that have been managed very well, and we're not seeing a lot of transmission. But with this highly transmissible variant, we need to have more space, more ventilation, and we need to ensure that we are enforcing the mask-wearing requirements that are in place for these events, and ensuring that we're scanning QR codes for these events. All sports tournaments that are both for youth and adults are suspended for the period of this order. We have seen that when you have tournaments, which is teams coming from many different places, coming together over a period of days, those are events where we can see spread of this virus and then taking it back to different communities. I know there are a number of tournaments, particularly hockey tournaments around the province, that were due to start on Boxing Day. Those will need to be suspended and postponed for the period of time of this order. Teams can continue to have games and to travel for games, but only when you're playing one-on-one in a limited time frame. Finally, under the events and gatherings, all New Year's Eve parties will be suspended, no matter their size. We can still have restaurants can continue to operate at full capacity and can have New Year's Eve meals, but we also have some amendments to the food and liquor service premises order that will come into place on Monday as well. So restaurants can continue to operate at full capacity, but guests must remain at their table and masks must be worn when not seated. So this goes back to what took us through the last few waves of this virus, of this pandemic, where you go with your group of people to the restaurant, you stay at the table together, there's no mingling and standing and mixing of tables, and this will apply for New Year's Eve as well. Restaurants can have that special New Year's Eve dinner, and we are not putting any restrictions on serving of alcohol or hours of operation, but there can be no mixing of guests for receptions, for parties, and the ban on things like dancing and other higher risk indoor activities remains in place. And finally, retail stores will be stepping up, and we're asking you to put in place COVID safety plans for holiday and Boxing Day sales. We do encourage people to shop locally and to support your local businesses, and we want to make sure that that can be done safely during this period of increased risk of transmission. What we want to do right now is limit those holiday gatherings to be only with our family and close friends. And I know how important it is for us to spend time with people. We have been through a lot in this province, and we need to be with family and friends over this period of time. Excuse me. And for those of us who woke up this morning to the earthquake at 4:14, as I did, sometimes it can be challenging to think, are we going to make it through this year? We are. We know what we need to do, and we've been here before. We know we can slow the spread. We know there are many things that we can still do to support each other and to get through this. We can still host a holiday meal, but ensure everybody is fully vaccinated so that you can do that in the safest way possible. We can still socialize and spend time with others, but do it in a way that doesn't increase risk. So if you have friends or family members who are unvaccinated, have one-on-one meetings with them or gatherings with them, or do it outside, go for a walk. By doing this now, we'll be able to keep other important aspects of our community going, and with these orders in place, we know that it supports our schools coming back, post-secondary institutions remaining open, and, of course, supporting as much as we can our businesses and communities functioning. We will be closely monitoring, of course, the situation, and we'll make changes as we need to. That is something we've had to do. When we have plans and we look at the situation that we're dealing with on a day-by-day basis, and we need to adjust and change when the situation changes. And this new variant has put us in that situation again. I recognize that this unrelenting uncertainty and this evolving situation is very unsettling for many people, and it can cause a lot of anxiety, depression, and discouragement. I want to say that we can get through this, and it is so important right now that we continue to support and care for each other. The days are dark right now, but soon the winter solstice will be coming, and the days will get longer once again, and we'll be turning ever so slowly back towards the light. Let's take encouragement from this. If you are feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or unable to cope, we have resources to support you, and I talked about this a few weeks ago. I encourage people to call 811, visit Bounce Back BC. The Kids Help phone line is toll-free 24-hour phone counseling. And you can call 1-800-668-6868 if you need that support. Let's do our part to help slow this virus down, keep our groups small. Let's ensure everyone in our family is vaccinated so that we have the best protection possible, and support our friends, neighbors, and communities. While there are restrictions in place, there is so much that we can do now because we have those tools in place. We can continue to enjoy each other's company, the warmth, kindness, and compassion of this holiday season, and that doesn't need to pause. So I ask everyone, please continue to take all of the things that we know work to help keep us all safe and protected, and continue to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. 77 countries have now reported cases of Omicron, And the reality is that Omicron is probably in most countries, even if it hasn't been detected yet. Omicron is spreading at a rate we have not seen with any previous variant.
It's 17 hours.
We're concerned that people are dismissing Omicron as mild. Surely, we have learned by now that we underestimate this virus at our peril. Even if Omicron does cause less severe disease, the sheer number of cases could once again overwhelm unprepared health systems. I need to be very clear. Vaccines alone will not get any country out of this crisis. Countries can and must prevent the spread of Omicron with measures that work today. It's not vaccines instead of masks. It's not vaccines instead of distancing. It's not vaccines instead of ventilation or hand hygiene. Do it all. Do it consistently. Do it well. Vaccines are tools that have the greatest impact when they're used to protect those who are most at risk in all countries. In the past 10 weeks, COVAX has shipped more vaccines than in the first 9 months of the year combined. Most countries are using vaccines as fast as they get them. A small group of countries are facing challenges rolling out vaccines and scaling up rapidly, and WHO and our partners are working closely with those countries to overcome bottlenecks. Although we expect further improvements in supply, there are no guarantees, and the hard-won gains we have made are fragile. We continue to call on donors and manufacturers to put COVAX and AVAT first. At the same time, evolving evidence suggests a small decline in the effectiveness of vaccines against severe disease and death, and a decline in preventing mild disease or infection. The emergence of Omicron has prompted some countries to roll out booster programs for their entire adult populations, even while we lack evidence for the effectiveness of boosters against this variant. WHO is concerned that such programs will repeat the vaccine hoarding we saw this year and exacerbate inequity. It's clear that as we move forward, boosters could play an important role, especially for those at highest risk of severe disease and death. Let me be very clear. WHO is not against boosters. We are against inequity. Our main concern is to save lives everywhere. It is a question of prioritization. Who gets what vaccines in what order?
Olympic organic yogurt, made in BC. Yep, right here.
Boosters to groups at low risk of severe disease or death simply endangers the lives of those at high risk who are still waiting for their primary dose because of supply constraints. On the other hand, giving additional dose to people at high risk can save more lives than giving primary dose to those at low risk. Together, we will save the most lives by making sure health workers, older people, and other at-risk groups receive their primary dose of vaccines. In most countries, those being hospitalized and dying are those who have not been vaccinated. So the priority must be to vaccinate the unvaccinated, even in countries who have better access to vaccines. It's really quite simple. The priority in every country and globally must be to protect the least protected, not the most protected. There remains a vast gap in rates of vaccination between countries. 41 countries have still not been able to vaccinate 10% of their populations, and 98 countries have not reached 40%. We also see significant inequities between population groups in the same country. If we end inequity, we end the pandemic. If we allow inequity to continue, we allow the pandemic to continue. Tariq, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros, for these opening remarks. We will now open the floor to questions. We have a number of journalists already raising their hands, so I would really ask everyone to be short and ask one question only. So we will start with Nina Larsen from Agence France Presse. Nina.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask about the study that came out of South Africa today that showed that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was 70% effective in stopping severe illness from Omicron. I think that is lower than against previous variants, but perhaps higher than you had expected. Have you seen the data on this, and how do you think this data could impact your views going forward on the recommendations of a third dose? Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. So we will start with Dr. Kate O'Brien.
Thanks for the question. And as you know, the data on Omicron and the performance of vaccines is in very early days. Both laboratory studies of the sera from people who have been vaccinated, as well as now real-world evidence on the performance of the vaccines against clinical disease. So we're looking at the report, evaluating exactly what was studied and the results from the report. And I think what's really important to recognize here is that, and we've had a report also, as you know, from the UK on Friday. What's really important is that these are early reports, and there are considerations about exactly who was vaccinated, what the disease severity is. So certainly of significant interest, and we'll continue working with partners on additional reports that we know are coming, because it really is about an aggregate of evidence from around the world. I think the important thing, though, is that really we have to emphasize that transmission of Omicron is not going to be solved by vaccine. Protecting people against that severe end of the disease spectrum is really critical, but we have to be doing all of the interventions in order to assure that we have the lowest transmission possible as Omicron is moving its way through different populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. We will go to the next question, and that will be Latika Burke from Sydney Morning Herald. Latika?
Hi, team. Thank you for taking my question. This is asking in a kind of COVID variant agnostic way, but what do we have yet on the data on reinfections? Because in the UK, we're seeing people becoming reinfected with COVID twice and occasionally 3 times. And so I'm wondering if we can expect this virus to weaken as it reinfects us, and what the data you have on reinfections tells us about how we're going to have to manage this in the long term.
Thank you, Latika. So Dr. Abdi Mahmoud will try to answer.
Thank you so much. Just related to the other question we answered, they are receiving a lot of data, and thanks to all the countries that shared the data. The South Africa team have established a well system while they have been tracking reinfection even before Omicron. the initial signal they received was they have seen even before the indication of the genetic sequencing, there was an early indication of signals of higher number of reinfection related to Omicron. So based on that, they alerted, and there are a lot of sequencing done because of that. So we are evaluating that disease, but as it's a global picture, so what's happening in South Africa might not be applicable to other countries. It has different level of immunity, but we are seeing an early indication that Omicron may be giving a higher reinfection, and that's related the one side of the transmissibility and other ability of it to evade some of the antibodies established by either natural infection or by vaccination. But we at early stage, only 2-3 weeks. As we get more and more data and data coming from a variety of countries, we'll be able to say how much reinfection is happening. But we do have early signals coming from South Africa that's showing the reinfection is higher with Omicron compared to Delta and Beta.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud. We will now give the floor to Kai Kupferschmidt from Science. Kai, please unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks for taking my question, Tariq. I just wanted to ask, we've seen a lot of data, neutralization assays and so on the immune escape potential, but of course the vaccine data very often is data on BioNTech or AstraZeneca vaccines. There's very little data on some of the other vaccines that have been used to vaccinate a huge part of the world. Are you doing anything to make sure that that data is generated as well? Do you have any preliminary data on any of these other vaccines?
Thank you, Kai. Dr. Henao Restrepo may want to try.
Thank you for the question. So we have 3 lines of work. The first one is collaborating with all the researchers that are doing animal studies and assay studies and facilitating the communication for protocols, for access to samples, the virus, etc. The second line of work is gathering the information and reviewing every day the new data that emerges. And the third is to have discussions like the one we plan for tomorrow with all the global experts to see what the data suggests. So far, we have looked at 13 studies that aim to evaluate evasion of immunity by the Omicron variant. Of all these 13 studies, I can tell you 3 things. First, many of the studies are small. They use different methodologies. And when I mean different methodologies, is they use different assays, different convalescent plasma, different virus. So to put them together, you have to spell out a bit more the details so that we can come to conclusions. The second is that they all suggest or indicate that maybe there is a decrease in the neutralization antibody titers, but what is the clinical relevance of these results? We continue to search for that. And finally, I want to say that we are interested in all the researchers to provide data. So we have reached out to about 340 researchers all around the world so that they can share the data, and we are posting this information live in our website. Tomorrow, again, we will have this consultation, and hopefully we will uncover more knowledge on this. Thank you.
Dr. Ryan?
And if I could just add that the primary target of these products, of vaccines, is to prevent severe illness, hospitalization and death. And that is the measure, Kai, as you know, that we hold the vaccines against. We would always expect, especially with a mucosal infection like this, to see a drop-off in protection against infection over time. The question is, and I think your question was aimed at that, is to what extent do we see any loss in protection beyond neutralizing antibodies and looking at other immunologic markers and then looking at real world. And I don't know, Anna Maria, if we have any data on T-cell or other broader-based immunologic response, because the data from the previous question, again, some of the clinical data is pointing to, the vaccines are not failing at large. They seem to be providing a level of protection. The question is, how much protection are the current vaccines that we are using, which are currently life-saving against all the variants, to what extent do we lose any protection against severe illness and death against Omicron? The data is pointing towards there being significant protection, but as Anna Maria said, the data is not there to fully support a decision either way.
Yes, Dr. Ryan, thank you for reminding me to mention that there has been a review by Alexandro Setti and colleagues in lab that indicate that most of the T-cell epitopes are conserving the Omicron variant. This is very good news, and T-cell response may be very important for cross-protection and long-term protection, but the data is still moving. The other thing I want to say is there is a study from the UK, an observational study that was published and is highly commented, and as the authors of the study said in their discussion of their paper, their findings show that the effectiveness against symptomatic disease with the Omicron variant have declined, but they were unable to confirm that there was decrease in the protection against severe disease. So not only us, but the same authors of the study recognize the limitations. So we are still looking for additional data. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Dr. Restrepo, we will move on. We still have a long list of questions. Belissa Godinho from W Magazine in Portugal. Belissa?
Thank you for taking my question. In Portugal, there are cases of Omicron contagion, but the number of deaths caused by the disease is low. Can you comment on the subject? Thanks.
I think it was probably very early days in Portugal, and again, many countries, I think at least 77 countries so far have confirmed. I think the DG used that number, and many more probably have the variant. What has happened in the countries that have the variant is we've seen very rapid spread and very rapid transmission and a very large number of cases being generated. So a bit like with the Delta wave, when you have a large number of cases, even if that disease, as Dr. Tedros said, is slightly milder in each individual, if you have a huge wave of cases, you will see a lot of severity and you will see hospital systems coming under pressure. And Dr. Tedros' message today is to act now. His message today is to look at your health systems in the coming weeks. Make sure you have the health workers in place. Make sure you have the clinical triage in place. Make sure you've got oxygen supplies in place. Make sure that you're vaccinating the unvaccinated. Make sure you're taking every opportunity individually and at community level to stop transmission where you can. It is very difficult. This is a highly transmissible variant. It's hard to stop it. But you can take the heat out of the transmission by doing the simple things: protecting yourself, protecting your family, protecting your community, avoiding crowded spaces, wearing a mask, ensuring good ventilation, washing your hands. And the governments need to support communities in doing that by putting in place layered measures that support communities in doing that and getting the health system ready. Health workers are exhausted. Many countries have lost up to 20% of their health workers. Health systems are weaker now than they were a year ago, in reality. So, unfortunately, sometimes you can get up after the first punch, but it's very hard to get up after the second and third, and that's the difficulty. We're relying on health workers and a health system that have been weakened by this response, and Dr. Tedros' concern is that we don't be complacent. We don't wait for it to be overwhelmed by a wave of cases. We have some time to get better prepared and to make sure our systems are able to cope.
Your own research, and also to contact your local officials about things that are happening in your area, things that are going on not only with the pandemic, but with other things like in Surrey, BC, where the mayor would seemingly be trying to take advantage of the goodness of the residents of the people in that city. One with a police department that may or may not have any real merits to help the people of Surrey, BC, and two, by trying to use municipal funds to defend himself against his own wrongdoings. So Please contact your elected officials, speak with them about things, get more information, and if need be, band together and write massive letters in order to stop and have an effect on our communities. We do live in a democratic society, and our opinion counts. We just need to voice it. You've been listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio, and I've been your host, Michael Clocks. Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information, and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help. How we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.